Yeah. Welcome. Reporting on external data. My name is Ralf Schuntelmeier. I'm a product manager at Salesforce. I'm part of the platform team. I own Salesforce Connect, amongst other products. Also Data Import Wizard, Data Loader, and a new product that is called Data Integration Service at this point. A little about me. I grew up in Germany in a small town in the Black Forest called Lahr. And then after I finished my university degree, I moved to Philly in '95, part of the SAP boom in those days. And my plan was to stay for 1 year. And then somehow I made it out here, and then I got stuck. Pretty good place to get stuck. A funny note, I claim that I learned English from Eddie Murphy because my school English was definitely not good enough to understand all the people that I was working with. And HBO at the time had a Eddie Murphy special. So every night I watched an Eddie Murphy movie that I'd seen before in German. And after the third or fourth time, I actually finally started understanding what he was saying. So that was great hearing training. I joined Salesforce in 2008, so I'm approaching my 9th anniversary. And before that, I did about 10 years of startups here in the Valley. And I've been working in the cloud since about 2000, which is kind of scary looking back, because it was a very small cloud back then. I live in Berkeley, across the bay, with 2 kids. My favorite day at work, it's a volunteer event called Goals Against Hunger. And so for 1 day, we can pretend we are professional soccer players, run around, and we actually get paid for it, which is awesome. Unfortunately, this year I missed it. It feels like I had 7 lives at Salesforce. I worked on a large variety of products: Sales Cloud, Chatter, Community, Service Cloud, and currently I'm in Platform. And the most popular slide in the world. If I make statements that are forward-looking, please do not consider those statements for your purchasing decisions. However, today I really want to focus on what is already there, and less really doing a forward outlook. How many of you are actually using Salesforce Connect today in production? Okay. How many of those are using reporting on external data? Okay. So there's a purpose for this session. That's great. So I will start with a intro to Salesforce Connect, just so you get a quick feeling, what is this all about? Because there's still, even after being on the market for a few years, we still need to educate like what's really the functionality. And once we do the level set, we really dive into what can I do with reporting on external data? How can I use reporting data, for example, in Lightning Components? And then you've probably all heard of Wave. So there are also now abilities available in Wave where you can use reports as a data stream into a Wave dashboard or into a Wave data set, and you can use SOCL in Wave dashboards. But then I really want to dive into demo and also talk a little bit about reporting considerations. And then hopefully there's some time left for questions and answers. So what is Salesforce Connect? Salesforce Connect is really a virtual data integration tool. The idea behind it is, not all our data is in one application. I mean, yes, there's Salesforce, but there's probably an SAP, there's an Oracle, there might be a custom application. So typically there's a large variety of systems that hold data that I as a user might need to do my daily job. A good example would be a call center agent. A lot of the order information, payment information, return information, that's really not in Salesforce, but I want to use Salesforce in my call center. And Salesforce Connect can help you to bring all this data into Salesforce without the need to copy. The paradigm was really to be able to tightly connect with any API accessible application. And we want to make this possible declaratively, meaning you can integrate with clicks and with very little code. We started with read capabilities, so you could only read data from external systems. And then I think over a year ago, we introduced write capabilities. So you can use Salesforce to modify data in your external system or even to create records. You can use Salesforce Connect to connect to other Salesforce orgs. A lot of our customers have more than one Salesforce org. Or think of a M&A scenario, you buy a company that is also using Salesforce, you want to look at the data. A great way to eliminate the ETL problem by simply accessing that data. And today what we really talk about is reports, dashboards, and capabilities in Wave. So what did we do to make this happen? You probably are all familiar with standard objects, custom objects. So we created a new object type called external object. Think of it as the cousin of the custom object. It has most of its features and capabilities. And what it really does is we use this external object to store the metadata definition of the external API. So let's say you use SAP and you have order information in SAP. We bring in that order information as it is defined in SAP. So there is no data transformation happening. It's really a one-to-one move of the metadata into Salesforce, which really eliminates the transformation aspect, because that's where we typically spend a lot of time. Which fields do I have to map? What transformations do I have to do? Here we simply say we bring the data into Salesforce, we make it look and feel like Salesforce, we make it actionable like Salesforce data. The beauty of these external objects is that it gives you really the power of the platform. So a lot of the capabilities like search, we're talking about reporting today, then of course the whole programmatic aspect, whether that's Apex, Sozzle, Sockle, Lightning components, all these things that are available in the platform you can utilize with external objects. There are a few limitations. They are primarily driven by the fact that the data doesn't exist in Salesforce. So one question we always get is about triggers. Can you have triggers on external objects? You cannot, because the object doesn't exist. There are workarounds. Quite often the trigger actually has to be on a custom object or a standard object, and then you can trigger the communication to the external data system. We are currently also working on the ability to use change events in the external system to trigger processes in Salesforce. So that's just an example what the limitations are, driven by the fact that the data is not physically stored. And now you can imagine we are running reports on data that doesn't exist in Salesforce. So we had to be very conservative when we design, for example, our limits, and I will talk later also about these considerations. And based on lessons learned, these are also things that we are currently working on. Oops. The most important slide. There are 4 integration patterns that we support. I mean, my personal favorite is OData. It's a new standard, relatively new standard that has been really spearheaded by Microsoft and IBM. But it has been really taken on quickly. SAP now is also a big supporter of OData. Think of it as an XML light kind of protocol. It was originally designed for mobile use cases. The beauty of it is that what we can do is we can simply retrieve the metadata from the OData endpoint, and then we consume this metadata in Salesforce to generate everything you need automatically. So I will show you later all the object definitions, page layouts, all these things are generated automatically based on the metadata definition. We have a very sophisticated connector framework called the Apex Connector Framework, which allows you to build connectors for custom applications that have APIs. Good example would be Oracle. Oracle doesn't officially support OData, so a lot of our customers build their own custom connector to talk to the Oracle APIs, because Oracle actually has really good APIs. I mentioned Connect to Salesforce. We actually built our own Salesforce connector so that we can connect other Salesforce orgs with this framework. And then, of course, there's a large number of middleware partners. What they basically do is they provide connectivity sometimes to hundreds of different applications or data sources. and expose this as OData to Salesforce Connect. So all we have to do is talk to the middleware OData endpoint, and we can leverage the same concept to automatically generate the metadata in Salesforce. So this is kind of the framework, the concept behind reporting. So all the data that we will be looking at soon does not reside in Salesforce. So technically, you could create a report that spans 4 different applications, because that's as deep as we can go with the report type. But we'll talk about words of caution later, because we always have to keep in mind latency and performance. So what do I need to do to actually make this report happen? There's a magic little flag that very often folks forget. It's called allow reports. And what this flag does, it automatically generates a report type in the background. So when you sync, or when you connect to your external data source, you basically generate your external objects. You need to set this flag in order to get the report type created, which is really important. You can do this in setup then. I'll show you that all later. I just wanted to put that out because sometimes people forget and they're surprised why there are no report types. And it would also mean that you would not be able to use this object in a custom report type. So once you set this flag, the system automatically generates a standard report type for you. Be aware, there's no way to look at these standard report types or edit them. I mean, for me, that's sometimes a frustrating fact as a user. For whatever reason, we made a long time ago this decision that you cannot edit those. However, there are what is called, we'll talk about custom report types soon. So the report type basically has all the fields that are available in the external object. And if you're familiar with Report Builder, it looks and feels exactly the same as if you would create a report for a standard object or a custom object. In fact, later I will show you kind of a combination where you create a report based on standard objects and external objects, and there's really no difference in the Report Builder. Now, the beauty is really that you can create reports that, I don't want to use the term mashup, but that link external data to Salesforce data. For example, you have your accounts in Salesforce. You have your sales orders in SAP. You don't want to copy all the sales orders into Salesforce, but you can link the two together, and then you can actually run a report on that. Now, for this purpose, we are leveraging custom report types. Again, custom report types are nothing specific to external data. They have been around for probably 19 years. They exist for a very long time. And it's also kind of the framework in which we have to operate. But a custom report type is basically the metadata definition of what is the data that I want to report on. What are the fields that I can use in my report? What fields are available to an end user when they create a report? So you have to specify a little bit of some metadata. You have to give it a name. You have to select the primary account. You have to specify in which report category it will show up. And then in the next step, this is really where the relationships kick in. Yeah? Because here you define what are the objects that I want to include in my report. And here we have the account and the orders, and the order is actually external data, but we have an indirect lookup relationship between the external data and my account record. And for this reason, I can pull it into my custom report type here and then leverage in my report. This is then basically, just a very basic example where I mesh my account information, which is in the left column, with the order information that is in the other columns. You will also note in every report that contains external data will have this little yellow warning box at the bottom. I sometimes wonder, should we have put it at the top? Because the consideration we talk later. Now, Lightning Experience added some new capabilities for us that we can also leverage with external data. You have probably heard of Lightning Components. They're really powerful tool. What I like is there are a lot of standard out-of-the-box components. One of them is the report component. So you basically can link any report in the system to such a component and then drag that component on your page layout, which is very flexible. Or if you have development skills, you can create your own custom components that bring reporting data onto a page or into an application. Now, there are a few things I want to talk about here for Wave, because for us it's also a little bit of a change in paradigm, because Salesforce Connect was designed from the very beginning to be virtual, meaning no data resides within Salesforce. There have been many reasons why we made this decision. It could be data residency issues, it could be compliance issues. So folks just don't want to copy huge amounts of data into Salesforce. Now, Wave is operating a little bit different. Wave is operating on data sets, and these data sets actually are physically stored in Wave. So there's a capability called Wave trending. If you're familiar with reporting capabilities, I'm trying to think when we introduced it. It's probably 6 or 7 years ago. We introduced a feature called reporting snapshots, which actually use custom objects to store a snapshot of a report, and then you could do kind of very basic trending analysis over time. Now, Wave trending is kind of a similar feature or a similar concept. So what we can do is use a standard report that runs off external data and use it as input into Wave trending. So it could either be in a Wave dashboard definition, or you can actually now do it in a report itself. And the idea is really that you can track change over time of your data and really do trending analysis. So this is the first option. When you define a Wave data set, you can select the Trend Salesforce Data option, and then you actually have the ability to select a Salesforce report as basically as the input stream into Wave trending. And the beauty is that this report can contain external data. So then you schedule the report. It runs, for example, on a nightly basis, on a weekly basis, but it then actually copies the external data into a Wave data set. Now, the reason why I'm stressing that is because when we talk about Salesforce Connect, we always talk about the fact that data is not stored. So I simply want to make folks aware of that, because it's really a little bit of a change, especially when you think of PII data or things like that, or if you're in a healthcare environment. I mean, these are all things that you have to keep in mind, that in this use case scenario, the data would actually be physically stored. I mean, this is just a very basic example. You set up trending, and then you get a Wave dashboard that is generated automatically for you for this trending analysis. Now, relatively new is, so on this example here, you see a report that shows order information as relates to Salesforce account information. And on the top right, you see this icon trend in Wave. So now within the report, you can actually just click that button, and then the next screen asks you to define the schedule. And then the schedule runs and the dashboard is automatically created. So you really don't have to go into Wave in order to set this all up. It's all available from within the report view. So extremely simple and powerful. Now, a relatively new feature is the ability to access external data in Wave dashboards. So they have new capabilities leveraging SOCL in a Wave dashboard. And with SOCL, you can basically query external data and bring the data live into your Wave dashboard. Unfortunately, I was hoping that I could demo this specific aspect, but I failed miserably. My JSON skills are obviously not that sharp anymore, but I have a good screenshot. A really powerful tool also. And in this case, the data is not stored. So this is also real-time access from within a Wave dashboard using external data. Now let's take a quick look at the application. So here I am in setup, and I thought I'll just show you quickly what this is all about. I mean, the key aspect is really what is called an external data source. Oh no, did we lose internet connection? Ah. That would cause a long song and dance show. I guess we're back. So this is a very simple example of my favorite OData format. It's actually a publicly available sample service that you can play with yourself. I also highly encourage, sign up simply for a dev org. Salesforce Connect is included. It's very easy to set up. And you can use these sample services to play around. So the external data source itself, it's basically, think of some metadata. You have to give it a name. You have to select the type, whether it's OData 2, OData 4, whether it's a Salesforce connection, whether it's a custom adapter, and then some additional items, for example, whether you want to enable search, the format, whether it's atom or JSON. And then this is very important, the authentication. Now this is a sample, so there is no authentication, but you can do per user authentication. You can use a principal user and other means. Now this is pretty much all I have to maintain. And as soon as I click save and then validate and sync, the system communicates with the OData endpoint. It reads the metadata and basically generates the objects that you see here automatically. So it created a whole bunch of objects. One of them here is called invoices. And all these fields that you see here, I mean, typically when you create a custom object, the typical way is you do this by hand and you create one field after the other. It's kind of painful. Here, this is all generated automatically by simply using the metadata definition of the endpoint. Now, what is not generated automatically are these relationships here. I have here an internal indirect lookup of the customer ID to the account. So this is really important to understand the concept because the account is a Salesforce record. The customer ID is the number that is used in the external system, and you need to create that link in between the two. And then we also have here an external lookup. An external lookup basically lets you do lookups from one external object to another external object. That's how you get the daisy chaining going. So these things you have to maintain as an admin, right? And then also you notice here in the top right corner, the little chat box, enable reports. So this is really important because it automatically generates a report type. Now I'm just looking here at a different object called products. And you see here, it is not enabled. meaning there is no report type. So if I go over here into reports, and I want to create a new report, there's no report type called products available. So you see the invoices because we had the checkbox on. So just for the fun of it, so I set the flag, and then hopefully it shows up. There it is. And then all the fields that you just saw in the object definition are available for reporting. And then it's the And so for the end user, it's almost very difficult to discern whether it's an external data source or whether it's internal. And here's the trend in wave button that I mentioned earlier. I'll just click it now. And I could immediately say, please trend this data for me, run it on a weekly basis, monthly, daily, just specifying here the parameters. Now, this was a standard report type. But I mentioned earlier, sometimes a single report might not be enough. So I'm simply looking here at one that links accounts with orders and invoices. Orders and invoices are stored in the external system. Accounts reside in Salesforce. And this is specified in this report type. So I basically say my parent is the account, then I relate orders, and then I relate invoices. And then below here, in the layout, I specify what are all the fields that I want to make available for reporting. So again, standard reporting capabilities, not really a difference between external data and internal data. So here I created already a report. So it pulls in data from Salesforce and from two different objects. As I mentioned earlier, theoretically, this could be multiple different data sources as well. I have already used the trending, so I already set up a schedule. So easily I click View Trend, and then it opens a wave dashboard right here within Salesforce to display the trending data. Now let's take a quick look here at the Lightning components. So I created a very basic app that is using such a component. So I'm basically having a report component on my page layout for this app here. And the beauty is these are standard components. So now I'm here in the Lightning App Builder. I see all my standard components here. One of them you can see here is a report chart. This is what I put on the page. And basically all you do is you link the report that you want to use for this component. So again, this is all declaratively, which I like because I don't have to do any coding. If you have more specific requirements, you always have the ability to create a custom component. Here I have a quick example where I'm actually going live on SAP data. And this was done by a partner of us, a company called Vigence. And they have delivered about 50 components out of the box. They're available on the App Exchange, and some of them are such report components that you can also use. Switching back here. Now, a few things to really consider when we talk about external reporting. I think what is really important, because I get a lot of requests where customers, for example, they want to run reports on a data warehouse. So they have millions and millions and millions of records, and they want to run reports on those millions of records. That's really not an ideal use case for reporting on external data. Reporting on external data, the way I look at it, it's really more for augmented reporting. You know, I want to see all the orders for one account, for example. I want to see the revenue for one account. Because like I said, what we have to keep in mind is there's network latency, and there might be latency on the system that actually holds the data, right? So we always have to keep that in mind. So my recommendation is always use as finely scoped as possible for best results. We have to keep in mind that when you run a report, that your system is actually performing a call out for each external object in the report. If you have joint reports, you actually do call outs for each block in the joint report. Now here is a little bit of a caveat, and that's an item that we really want to improve, is if your URL, keep in mind the URL contains all the filters, for example. If I say I want to run, show me all the orders for accounts, we talk about 2,000 accounts, 2,000 IDs, they don't fit into a URL because the limit is 2 kilobytes. So we have to split it up, meaning instead of doing one call to get the data, we might do 10 calls, 20 calls, 100 calls. So this is something that we are currently working on. Can we extend the length of the URL? So something to keep in mind. There's also always the question about limits. How many rows can I get back? What's the maximum? And I would love to give you one number, but I can't. There's single reports, that's easier. I mean, it's like in standard reporting, the limit is 2,000 records. But if you have a joint report, for example, in our case here, I have accounts. So we go first, get the first 2,000 accounts, and for those first 2,000 accounts, we go in and get all the orders that are related to them, and then we go and get the invoices. So you get much more potentially than 2,000 records, but depending on size and everything, we cannot really give you a hard number that says 10,000 or something like this. This is also an area that we're working on. Initially, we set the limits very low because we were very concerned about, we deal with external data. But we run a lot of analysis about average response time, and a lot of the callouts, they are like in the 200 millisecond range, which is really amazing to get the data back in. So we're currently testing, can we increase this limit or make it an option to increase the limit so that you can create larger reports. Important that reporting is not supported for high data volume option. I didn't mention really the high data volume option. Typically, when you bring in external data, what we do is we generate an ID in Salesforce that maps to the ID in the external system. This allows us, for example, to support chatter. This makes so many things so much easier, especially if you're using Lightning Experience, you need an ID. So without ID, we cannot really work. So the original design of high data volume was really, you don't do the ID mapping, you just want to consume data quickly, but reporting also needs IDs, hence no support for high data volume. Bucket fields are not supported. The traditional historical trend is not supported. I just showed you how you could use Wave to do that. And then cross filters do not support external lookup relationships. So if you use external lookup relationships, where the parent account is an external object, so you cannot leverage cross filters. I think that's good enough, because I want to leave some time for question and answers. So we have about 5 minutes. We have a microphone, and maybe if we can just pass this around, I think that makes life much easier. Or do I have a volunteer who might be the runner, something young?
I'll ask the question first too, so.
You have the jumping shirt, so.
There we go. So my question is related to search. So I would like to be able to turn on global search, but also have the option to have external objects not show up in knowledge base search. Is that possible, or do you know if that will someday be possible?
I know that we have a discussion thread going on to exclude certain items. I mean, currently we, and I can only speak for external objects, we control search at the object level, right? So every object you can decide whether you want it to show up in global search or not. I think knowledge is a specific case. So I know we have conversations how we can make that customizable, but I don't have kind of a fact to give you, unfortunately.
It's me. Here.
Oh.
When you mention there is a call out per object, are you referring to per record? Like if I'm displaying 50 records and there is like an external field, it goes for each row, it makes a call out, or is it, you mentioned that a call out per object. So if I have a listing, like let's say 50 accounts on the page, and each account has an external field, like grabbing external data from external object, related object, how many calls am I going to have for displaying?
I mean, it makes one call for the external object, right, to get the data. But then, as I mentioned, if you have a lot of filter criteria, we might split that into multiple calls. And I would say in the past it was a problem because we had been very strict on the call-out limits, but now we typically increase the limits if a customer is running close to reaching them. But definitely on the reporting side, we need to do some more optimization, not necessarily from a performance point of view on the Salesforce side, but sometimes we talk to external systems, and if I send 50 requests, that might put a burden on its system. So we need to make sure that we optimize that.
You mentioned network latency. Are all these calls synchronous?
They are all synchronous, yes.
Is that going to change in the future?
Not that I know of.
Fair enough.
Hi, is there a trailhead or other kind of resource for setting up the custom objects and all that?
There's a trailhead for how to set up Lightning Connect. I don't think there's a trailhead for reporting right now. It's on my list. I really want that.
Yes,
So
setting up Sales Connect and connecting to an OData source.
yes, there's a trailhead for that.
Okay.
And that's the foundation. And then I would say reporting comes with it. I mean, they're not the instruction, but if you're familiar with standard reporting, it's, yeah.
Hi. You said there's a limit of 2,000 records that are fetched. Does that apply to the export data button as well?
Say again?
So you said there was a limit of 2,000 records fetched in the report. Does that apply to the export data? Because with the export, doesn't that bring more than 2,000?
We currently have our own limit that is linked to that. So as I mentioned, we are working actually with the analytics team to increase the limits. Because now we actually have data from our customers, and we haven't really encountered performance issues. So we are working on increasing the number so that you can go beyond. So that even though we only display the first 2,000, you would be able to still get more. Availability, TBD, unfortunately. One last? Two last?
Does external object saves Salesforce database as well? Is it like increases Salesforce database or?
No.
Okay.
So the only caveat, that's why I was pointing it out, if you use wave trending, it saves it into a wave data set, but that doesn't count against the Salesforce storage.
So building reports supports the adding charts to the reports, right?
Yes.
So like the limit of 2,000 records, and you want the chart to say do a group by or show you bar charts and everything, but based on the full data set. So your chart is basically kind of limiting to only 2,000, right?
It's a very good question, because always keep that in mind that you're only looking at a subset of the data. That's why my recommendation is always finely scoped reports, because we don't want to replace Wave, for example, or other analytics tools. It's really the idea behind it is to bring in data as you need it, tightly scoped. It's not give me everything and then determine some KPIs. Okay? Are we good? Thank you so much.